There is a season in every life when the heart simply stops explaining itself. It doesn't arrive with a slammed door or a raised voice. It arrives quietly, almost gently, like a candle deciding on its own that it has burned long enough for one night. There is no bitterness in it, no war cry, just a settled, steady calm, a calm that turns out to be far more convincing than any argument you could ever make. And somewhere inside that calm is a lesson most people never get taught in school, in church, or at their mother's kitchen table. Respect is not something you win by asking for it. It is something you demonstrate. Nobody negotiates their way into being respected. They simply become the kind of person respect cannot help but notice. So let's sit with an image for a moment. Picture yourself walking into a room where, once upon a time, people spoke over you, where they doubted your judgment before you'd even finished a sentence, where your kindness got mistaken for weakness and your silence got mistaken for permission. Now picture walking into that exact same room again, same faces, same furniture, same old tension in the air, except this time you're not carrying louder words. You're not carrying a sharper comeback, and you're certainly not carrying revenge. You're carrying something far more disruptive to the old dynamic: presence, just presence. And presence, it turns out, has a voice louder than shouting ever did. Here's something worth understanding about people who thrive on chaos. They have a strange, almost predatory talent. They study softness the way a hunter studies footprints in fresh snow. They clock how fast you apologize for things that were never your fault. They notice how easily you forgive, how often you shrink yourself down just to keep the peace in a room that was never peaceful to begin with. And the moment they see that you bend, they lean in harder. The moment they see that you explain yourself, they start questioning everything you say. The moment they see that you tolerate something, they test how much further that tolerance stretches. This is not paranoia. This is a pattern you can watch play out in family gatherings, in office hallways, in group chats, in relationships that quietly drained you for years before you had the language to name what was happening. But here is the turning point, the exact hinge on which everything swings. The day you stop performing your pain for their approval is the day the entire dynamic collapses in on itself. Because people who feed on conflict need your reaction, the way a fire needs oxygen. They grow stronger off your frustration. They get a strange, twisted sense of power from watching you scramble to prove yourself, to defend yourself, to make them finally understand you. And the single most powerful thing you will ever do in your life, more powerful than any comeback, any confrontation, any perfectly worded text message, is to stop feeding them that energy. Not sometimes, not when you happen to be in a good mood, completely. There is a particular kind of silence that people misread constantly. It is not weakness, it is not fear curling up in the corner, it is not surrender with its hands in the air. It is a silence that stands up straight, shoulders back, chin level. A silence that says, without a single word, I have already measured the value of my peace, and it outweighs the value of your opinion of me. And once a person arrives at that place, really arrives, not just visits it for an afternoon, something remarkable shifts in them. They stop arguing with disrespect as though it were a debate to be won. They stop negotiating with cruelty as though it were a business deal. They stop explaining their worth to people who decided a long time ago not to see it, no matter what evidence is placed in front of them. Instead, they do one simple, almost boring thing. They change how they respond. That's it. That's the whole revolution. Disrespect, if you look closely at it, cannot survive in a vacuum. It needs oxygen just like everything else. It needs your attention to feed on. It needs your participation to keep the show running. It needs your willingness to keep standing in the same storm, holding an umbrella made of hope, waiting for the wind to eventually apologize for how hard it's been blowing. But the moment you quietly step out of that storm, no dramatic exit, no speech, just gone, the wind discovers it has nothing left to push against. It howls into empty space, and empty space doesn't flinch. Let me tell you something worth writing down. A person who has genuinely arrived at self-respect does not spend the rest of their life running workshops on how to treat them. They are not out here handing out instruction manuals to everyone who mishandles their heart. They show people once, and then they simply live it. They walk away from conversations that poison their spirit, the way you'd walk away from a room filling with smoke, not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. They refuse to shrink themselves in rooms that seem to require it. They do not argue their boundaries into existence. They live those boundaries, day after day, choice after choice. And boundaries that are spoken through action instead of argument become the most powerful language a human being can speak, because words can always be debated, twisted, reinterpreted, quoted out of context. But nobody can argue with someone's absence. Nobody can win a debate against a closed door. Now, I already know what some of you are thinking, because it is the exact question that keeps so many good people stuck. But if I don't defend myself, won't they think they've won? Let me answer that plainly. Peace is never a loss. Walking away from disrespect is never, under any interpretation, a defeat. And refusing to wrestle in the mud with someone who genuinely enjoys the mud is not cowardice. It is the highest form of wisdom available to a human being. Toxic people consistently mistake your patience for weakness. They mistake your kindness for submission. They mistake your silence for surrender, right up until the day they meet a version of you that no longer negotiates with disrespect at all. A version of you that has quietly absorbed a very simple, very unglamorous truth. Not everyone deserves access to your heart. Not everyone deserves access to your time. Not everyone has earned a front row seat to your spirit. And when that truth finally settles into your bones, not just your mind but your bones, something remarkable begins to happen. Your energy changes, your posture changes. Even your eyes begin to carry a certain calm, the kind that unsettles the very people who once thrived on provoking a reaction out of you. You stop over-explaining yourself in rooms that never deserved an explanation. You stop over-giving to people who never once reciprocated. You stop over-tolerating behavior that quietly chipped away at your sense of self. You become clear. Clear about what you allow into your life. Clear about what you walk away from without a second thought. Clear in the understanding, finally, that your peace is not a public resource for anyone with a grievance to come and consume. And here's the strange part. Toxic people can feel that clarity even if they can't name it or explain it to themselves. They may not understand exactly what changed, but they feel the shift in the room the moment they walk into it. The person they once manipulated with guilt now answers with distance instead of apology. The person they once controlled with criticism now answers with a quiet, unshaken confidence instead of a scramble to fix things. The person they once drained dry now stands in front of them, completely unavailable to their chaos, like a phone line that's simply been disconnected. And just like that, the entire game changes, whether they're ready for it or not. But listen closely to this part, because it's the heart of everything. The power was never in proving them wrong. The power is in no longer needing them to see you correctly at all. Let that sink all the way in. So many beautiful, capable, deeply good people waste years, sometimes decades, trying to correct the vision of people who are fundamentally committed to misunderstanding them. But freedom arrives the exact moment you accept that some people only ever see you through the fog of their own insecurity, their own wounds, their own unresolved history. And you don't clear that fog by shouting through it. You clear it, if you clear it at all, by simply walking forward in your own light and letting the fog stay behind, exactly where it belongs. Now here is the one action, just one, that shifts absolutely everything once you're ready to take it. You stop rewarding disrespect with your presence. You stop showing up to arguments that were designed from the start to drain you. You stop explaining yourself to ears that were only ever listening for ammunition to use against you later. And when you finally do this, something predictable happens. At first, toxic people push harder. They question your silence like it's a personal insult. They try to provoke the old, more reactive version of you, because people who benefited from your lack of boundaries feel genuinely threatened the moment you start growing past them. But if you stay steady, if you stay calm, if you stay rooted in the quiet dignity of your own self-respect, they eventually learn something they never expected to learn about you. You are no longer available for their games. Not today, not ever again. There is something almost sacred in what happens when a person finally learns the art of emotional non-participation. It is the moment you realize you do not have to attend every single battle you're invited to, even the ones with your name written in the subject line. It is the moment you realize that not every opinion aimed in your direction deserves a response. It is the moment you realize that some people only feel powerful when they can disturb your peace, and the instant your peace becomes unshakable, their entire source of power quietly evaporates. Now let me say something important, because this part matters. This path is not easy, and it was never going to be easy, because so many of us were raised to keep the peace at any cost, even the cost of our own well-being. We were taught to stay polite even while being disrespected. We were taught to stay understanding even while being mistreated. We were taught to keep explaining ourselves even when we had done absolutely nothing wrong. And unlearning all of that, unlearning a lifetime of conditioning, takes real courage. It takes courage to say, my kindness is not an open invitation for cruelty. It takes courage to say, I will not continue conversations that insult my own dignity. It takes courage to say, I do not need to defend my worth to anyone who is already committed to devaluing it. But once you cross that particular bridge, you will never once want to walk back over it. Because on the other side of it waits a version of you that is calm, centered, and deeply grounded in self-respect. And that version of you does something extraordinary without even trying. They make toxic people uncomfortable. Not by yelling, not by insulting, not by keeping score, but simply by refusing to participate in dysfunction anymore. Toxicity, at its core, needs reaction to survive. It needs drama. It needs emotional chaos to feed on like a fire needs fuel. But when it meets a person who answers hostility with calm, unbothered distance, the entire structure of that dysfunction begins to collapse from the inside out. And suddenly, not immediately, but suddenly in the way seasons change, the same people who once disrespected you without a second thought begin treating you completely differently. Not because you forced the change, not because you demanded it in some confrontation, but because you quietly removed the reward for mistreating you. Let me say that part again, because it deserves to be said twice. You remove the reward. Disrespect stops being entertaining, manipulation stops being effective, provocation stops producing any reaction at all. And when the reward disappears completely, the behavior itself loses its entire purpose. There's nothing left to sustain it. Now, take a moment and imagine waking up tomorrow morning with a quiet decision already settled in your heart. Not a loud declaration posted somewhere for an audience, not a dramatic speech rehearsed in the mirror, just a quiet, private commitment to yourself. A commitment that says, I will not argue with people who profit from my pain. I will not shrink myself to make others comfortable with their own disrespect. I will not explain my boundaries to people who benefit from crossing them. And then you simply live that commitment. Calmly, consistently, silently, and you watch how the entire world around you begins to shift in response. Watch how the same people who once dismissed you start measuring their words more carefully around you. Watch how the same voices that once mocked you grow noticeably quieter. Watch how respect slowly begins to appear in your life, not because you demanded it from anyone, but because you embodied it in everything you did. Because here's the truth underneath all of this. When you genuinely respect yourself, the entire atmosphere around you shifts to match. You stop chasing validation from rooms that were never going to give it to you. You stop negotiating your own dignity like it's a line item up for discussion. You stop proving your value to people who never asked to see the receipts in good faith. And in that quiet, unshakable confidence, something powerful happens without any fanfare at all. The people who cannot respect you begin to remove themselves from your life on their own, without a scene. The people who genuinely value you begin to draw closer, drawn by the very calm you worked so hard to build. And the noise of every toxic voice you've ever known slowly fades into the background of a life that is, for the first time in a long time, actually lived in peace. So here is one simple truth I want to leave sitting with you for a moment. You do not silence toxic people with arguments. You silence them with standards. Standards so clear, so calm, so unmovable that disrespect no longer finds a single place left to land in your life. There is a quiet power that lives inside a person who has finally learned the value of their own standards. Not a loud power, not the kind that needs applause, an audience, or anyone's approval to feel real, but a steady, grounded power that stands tall even when the whole room falls silent around it. It's the kind of power that never begs to be seen, and yet it changes the atmosphere of every space it enters, whether anyone in that space can name what changed or not. Your standards decide who is allowed to stay in your life. Read that sentence again, slowly, because as simple as it sounds, it carries enough truth inside it to completely transform a life. So many people spend years believing that love means endurance, that loyalty means tolerating whatever wounds them, that kindness means letting people cross lines that should never have been crossed in the first place. So they open their doors wide open. They open their hearts wider still. They make room for absolutely everyone, without exception, without a single filter. And slowly, without ever quite noticing the exact moment it happened, their peace begins quietly disappearing from their own life. Because here's the mechanism underneath it all. When standards go missing, boundaries become invisible. And when boundaries are invisible, people with careless intentions walk right in, completely unbothered, because nothing was ever there to stop them. They sit at your table like they were always invited. They drink from your energy like it's an endless well. They take from your patience like it costs them nothing. And because you were raised to be understanding above all else, you keep adjusting yourself to accommodate them. You keep explaining, you keep forgiving. But eventually there comes a day when even the most generous soul grows tired of being generous with people who have never once been careful with that generosity. There comes a moment when you look honestly at your own life and realize the exhaustion you feel isn't from doing too much. It's from allowing too much. And that realization, uncomfortable as it is the exact beginning of self-respect. Standards, understood correctly, are not walls built to isolate you from the world. They are doors that let the right people walk in and quietly close behind the people who are never meant to stay. Standards are the gentle guardians standing watch over your peace. They protect the dignity of your spirit and the calm of your mind day in and day out, whether you're thinking about it or not. Without them, life becomes a crowded room where everyone technically has access to you, but almost none of them actually value what they've been given access to. And here's a hard truth worth sitting with. Many of the people who disrespect you are not actually confused about how they're supposed to treat you. They are simply responding to whatever you've already shown them you'll accept. If you tolerate sarcasm dressed up as humor, it grows bolder over time. If you excuse manipulation dressed up as love, it repeats itself again and again, dressed a little differently each time. If you forgive cruelty dressed up as honesty, it eventually becomes normal. Not because you deserved any of it, but because your standards were never clearly drawn in the first place. A person who carries clear standards moves through the world with a noticeably different energy. There is a calm firmness in how they hold themselves. They are kind, but they are not easily bent out of shape. They are compassionate, but they are not easily controlled by guilt or pressure. Their kindness is never mistaken by them, at least for a permission slip to be disrespected. They understand something that far too many people only learn after years of heartbreak. Access to your life is a privilege, not a guarantee owed to anyone simply for showing up. And privileges, real privileges, are earned through consistent care, consistent respect, and consistent honesty. Thinking twice about it. We don't leave the windows wide open for anyone who happens to wander by. Not because we hate people, not because we're suspicious of the whole world, but simply because we value what's inside those walls. Your peace deserves that exact same protection. Your heart deserves that exact same protection. Your time, the one resource none of us ever get back, deserves that exact same protection. And yet so many people guard their physical possessions far more carefully than they guard their own emotional well-being. They'll double-check that their car is locked, but leave their heart wide open to anyone willing to manipulate it. They'll protect their bank account fiercely, but let people spend their energy freely, without gratitude, without even a thank you. Standards change all of that, quietly and permanently. Standards say, this is how I treat others and this is how I expect to be treated in return. Standards say, my kindness is not an unlimited resource for the people who consistently misuse it. Standards say, if your presence consistently brings chaos into my life, your presence will no longer remain in it. And here's the beautiful thing about standards, the part that makes them so different from confrontation. They don't require loud explanations. They don't require dramatic scenes or tearful confrontations in parking lots. They are lived quietly, through decisions made one at a time. You decide which conversations you continue and which ones you simply let end. You decide which behaviors you keep ignoring and which ones finally cost someone their place in your life. You decide ultimately which people remain close to you. And sometimes the single most powerful decision available to you is distance. Not angry distance, not revengeful distance dressed up as righteousness, just calm distance. The kind that protects your spirit, the kind that finally lets you breathe again, the kind that quietly reminds people your presence was never something to be taken for granted. When your standards rise, certain relationships will naturally fall away, almost like gravity finally doing its job. And that can feel painful at first, especially if you were raised to believe that letting go of anyone makes you disloyal by definition. But let me tell you something worth remembering on the hard days. Releasing relationships that repeatedly harm your peace is not betrayal. It is wisdom, plain and simple. There are people who will only start valuing you once they realize they can no longer easily replace you. And there are others who will leave the very moment they realize your new standards require them to actually grow. Both outcomes, as different as they feel, are necessary. Because the right people are never threatened by your standards. They are drawn to them. They respect your boundaries because they've built boundaries of their own. They appreciate your honesty because they live inside honesty themselves. They value your peace because they understand exactly what it costs to protect it. Standards filter your life in quiet, almost invisible ways over time. They reveal who genuinely respects you and who merely tolerated you back when you were easier to control. You begin noticing subtle differences you never picked up on before. The friend who actually listens instead of dismissing your feelings the second they get uncomfortable. The partner who speaks to you with care instead of reaching for criticism first. The colleague who values real cooperation over quiet competition. Healthy people never resent your standards. If anything, they feel safe around them because standards create clarity, and clarity removes the exhausting guesswork from every relationship. And when relationships are finally built on that kind of clarity, respect stops being something you fight for and starts being something that simply happens naturally without struggle. But toxic people, understandably, often react very differently to this shift in you. They might accuse you of changing, as if change were an accusation instead of growth. They might say you've become distant, cold, different somehow. They might even call you difficult, simply for having limits. What they're actually reacting to, whether they can articulate it or not, is the disappearance of the version of you they once knew how to manipulate. The version of you who stayed silent even when deeply uncomfortable. The version of you who explained yourself, endlessly hoping explanation alone would fix things. The version of you who tolerated disrespect just to keep an artificial peace intact. When that version of you finally disappears for good, the entire dynamic shifts along with it. And suddenly the same people who once spoke carelessly around you begin choosing their words far more carefully, because your standards have quietly announced something they can't ignore. You are no longer available for mistreatment. This kind of transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it was never supposed to. It grows slowly, the way a tree develops strong roots beneath soil nobody can see. In the beginning, the changes will likely feel uncomfortable, maybe even wrong. You might feel guilty the first few times you say no to something you would have automatically said yes to before. You might wonder if you're being too strict, too rigid, too much. You might worry endlessly about disappointing people who are used to you never disappointing anyone. But that guilt is very often just the echo of old conditioning talking. It is rarely a reliable signal that you're actually in the wrong. So many of us were raised to believe our value comes directly from how well we please other people. We were praised, rewarded, and celebrated for being agreeable, accommodating, endlessly forgiving. So naturally, when we finally begin developing real standards, it feels unfamiliar, even alarming at first. But unfamiliar was never the same thing as wrong. Unfamiliar, more often than not, simply means growth is underway. Every single time you honor a standard, instead of abandoning it under pressure, you strengthen your own sense of self a little more. Every time you walk away from disrespect instead of tolerating it one more time, you reinforce the quiet message that your dignity actually matters, to you if to no one else. And slowly, almost without noticing the exact turning point, something inside you finally settles. You stop seeking approval from people who never shared your values to begin with. You stop feeling responsible for fixing behavior that was never yours to fix. You stop exhausting yourself trying to maintain relationships that were only ever draining you dry. Instead, you begin building a life that actually reflects who you are underneath all that old conditioning. A life where your energy goes toward people who genuinely reciprocate care. A life where your time is spent inside conversations that lift you rather than diminish you. A life where your presence is appreciated, not simply taken for granted like background noise. Standards make that entire life possible, because every single decision you make either protects your peace or slowly weakens it, with no neutral option in between. Every person you allow close either nourishes your spirit or bit by bit erodes it. Your standards determine which outcome you get, far more than luck ever will. And the beautiful thing about all of this is that standards don't need to be harsh to be effective. They can be quiet, they can be graceful, they can be expressed through the smallest, most ordinary actions imaginable. Choosing not to participate in gossip, choosing not to respond to a disrespectful message at all, choosing not to remain in environments where your value gets constantly questioned. These choices might look small from the outside, almost invisible to anyone watching, but together, over time, they reshape the entire direction of a life. People eventually begin to recognize, whether consciously or not, that your presence is connected to respect, that the two travel together as a package now. And the people who cannot offer that respect eventually fade out of the picture on their own, without you having to push them. At first, that absence might feel lonely, and there's no use pretending it won't. But loneliness that comes from protecting your peace is far healthier, far more survivable than company that slowly destroys it from the inside. Because emptiness, uncomfortable as it feels, creates space. And space, given enough time, allows healthier relationships to finally walk in and take root. When your standards become genuinely clear, the right people recognize them almost immediately, often before you've said a single word about them. They see the calm confidence sitting behind your decisions. They see the careful way you protect your time without apologizing for it. They see how you walk away from negativity without theatrics, without a scene, without needing anyone's permission. And they understand instinctively that being part of your life now requires a certain baseline of care. Not perfection, Nobody's asking for perfection, just basic respect. Real relationships thrive inside that kind of environment because respect is the actual foundation that allows love to grow somewhere safe. Without respect, love turns fragile and brittle. Without respect, kindness curdles into exhaustion. Without respect, loyalty quietly becomes self-abandonment, dressed up in nicer language. Standards exist to protect love from ever becoming those things. They make sure the people closest to you treat your heart with the exact same care you so freely offer theirs. And when that balance finally exists in a relationship, everything about it starts to feel different. Relationships become nourishing instead of draining. You feel genuinely supported instead of merely tolerated. You feel valued instead of quietly used. You feel peaceful instead of constantly low-grade anxious in the background of your own life. But let's be honest, the journey to that place requires real courage, not just a nice thought you post somewhere. Courage to say no when every old habit inside you is screaming to say yes. Courage to walk away when staying would clearly be the easier, more comfortable path. Courage to accept that not everyone in your life is going to understand your growth, and that their confusion is not your responsibility to manage. Some people will openly prefer the version of you with lower standards, and it won't be because you were happier back then. It will be because they were more comfortable back then. But comfort that's built entirely on your silence was never real harmony to begin with. It was just quiet on the surface, covering something unsteady underneath. True harmony is built on mutual respect, and mutual respect cannot exist, cannot survive, without standards holding it up. Standards, at the end of the day, were never about controlling other people. They were always about controlling what you allow into your own life. You cannot force anyone to treat you well. That was never within your power, and it was exhausting to keep trying. But you absolutely can decide how long you remain in a room, a relationship, or a conversation when they choose not to. That decision alone, small as it seems in the moment, changes absolutely everything downstream from it. Because once people realize your presence is now tied to respect, they start treating that presence completely differently. And the ones who refuse to change, who dig in and stay exactly the same, simply remove themselves from the picture, which was never a loss. It was clarity, arriving exactly on time. Clarity reveals which relationships were sustained by genuine care all along, and which ones were only ever sustained by your tolerance. And once you finally see that difference clearly, you begin moving through life in a completely different way. You speak more carefully about how you spend your time. You choose your environments far more intentionally than before. You protect your emotional energy like it's something precious because it always was. You just hadn't been treating it that way. Your energy shapes the actual texture of your life. Where you invest it determines the quality of your days, one after another. If it keeps pouring into conflict, into manipulation, into recycled drama, your life will start to feel heavy in a way that never quite lifts. But when that same energy gets invested in growth, in real connection, in genuine peace, your life starts to feel lighter almost immediately, in ways you can feel in your shoulders before you can even explain it in words. Standards guide that investment for you, quietly and consistently. They remind you that you were never obligated to entertain every request that comes your way, tolerate every behavior aimed at you, or maintain every relationship simply because it's existed for a long time. You are allowed to choose peace over familiarity, allowed to choose respect over history, allowed to choose environments where your presence is welcomed with real sincerity, not just tolerated out of habit. And the moment you fully accept that truth, not just understand it intellectually, but actually accept it, something powerful begins to happen in your life. It starts aligning with your actual values instead of your old conditioning. The chaos that used to surround you begins to fade piece by piece. The noise that used to constantly distract you grows quieter, week after week. And the people who remain in your life, the ones still standing there at the end of all this filtering, share one simple, unmistakable quality. They respect the standards that protect your peace. Because your standards decide who is allowed to stay. Not your patience, not your explanations, not how much you're willing to endure to keep someone comfortable. Your standards. And the sooner you let that sentence settle all the way into your bones, the sooner your life quietly starts to feel like your own again. There's one more thing worth saying before we close this out tonight. Something that tends to get lost in all the talk about boundaries and distance and walking away. None of this was ever about becoming cold. It was never about building a fortress so high that nothing gets in, ever, including the good things. Standards, done right, don't shrink your capacity to love, they protect it. They make sure the love you give doesn't get quietly bled dry by people who never intended to reciprocate it. A person with real standards can still be deeply warm, deeply generous, deeply present with the people who've earned their closeness. The difference is that warmth is no longer handed out indiscriminately to anyone who shows up asking for it. It's offered on purpose to people who've shown they know what to do with it. And maybe that's the quiet gift hiding underneath all of this. Once you stop spending your energy managing people who were never going to change, you suddenly have an enormous amount of energy left over. Energy you didn't even realize you'd been losing for years. That energy goes somewhere. It goes into the work you actually care about. It goes into the friendships that give back as much as they take. It goes into the version of yourself you kept putting on hold because you were too busy managing everyone else's comfort. Standards don't just remove the wrong people from your life. They make room for the right ones and for the parts of you that had been waiting patiently in the background for permission to finally take up space. So if tonight you recognize yourself somewhere in these words, if some old, tired part of you has been carrying disrespect quietly for far too long, hoping it would eventually resolve itself, let this be the moment you set that weight down. Not with anger, not with a speech prepared for anyone, just with a quiet decision made privately to finally live by the standards your peace has been asking for all along. You don't owe anyone a dramatic exit. You don't owe anyone a final argument to win. You only owe yourself the life that was waiting on the other side of your own self-respect. And once you start living there, even imperfectly, even one boundary at a time, you'll understand exactly why they say peace was never the loss. It was always the reward.